start it? No, tap it. Hi, my name is Laura McKenzie, and I'm going to be talking about cochlear implants and the technology that surround it and how it can improve the physical function of somebody's life. So I'm going to talk specifically about the problem that exists, how the technology started, how the technology works, how it's being used today, and then the cost and availability that revolve around cochlear implants, and then the results that they can give to a person. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the problem and solution. The problem that arose in order to start the research for cochlear implants was sensory neural hearing loss. So there's actually 3 types of hearing loss that can exist in a person. One of them being conductive hearing loss, the second one being sensory neural hearing loss, and then the third one being a mix between the two. So what cochlear implants can do is help somebody that specifically has sensory neural hearing loss. So the goal would be to restore hearing to the individual with severe sensory neural hearing loss. So cochlear implants bypass the damaged inner ear hair cells inside one's cochlea to send an auditory signal to the auditory nerve. I'm going to explain a little bit how hearing actually works through our cochlea, so this will make more sense with the damaged hair cells. So how someone might get damage to their inner ear hair cells could be through loud noise, like one very loud noise, or through loud noise for an extended period of time, or through antibiotics, or meningitis, or disease like Meniere's disease. There's other etiologies that could happen in order to create sensory neural hearing loss, but those are the main ones that we see. And a lot of times it does happen to be the extended loud noise on somebody, like working in a factory for a long amount of time and having the same loud noise in your ear. That would definitely damage some of those inner ear hair cells. And I got all this information from asha.org. So now I'm going to explain how cochlear implants specifically work, but in order to do so, I'm going to talk about the anatomy of our ear and how we hear through our ear. So there's actually 3 parts of our ear. There's the outer, middle, and inner ear. The outer ear is where we gather acoustic signals, and they go through our ear canal to our eardrum. And then our inner ear deals with 3 little tiny bones that the signal goes through to then get to our inner ear. So our outer ear is acoustic energy of auditory information. Then our middle ear is mechanical energy that relays the auditory information. And then our inner ear is hydroelectric energy, because there's water, there's actually fluid in our inner ear and electrical signal that goes through our inner ear to then send it to our auditory nerve, which sends a signal to our brain. So that's a lot of information, but with a cochlear implant, it's just important to know that it's only dealing with this specific part of our ear when it comes to hearing loss. So here's the cochlea in a bigger view, and what a cochlear implant does is it sends an electrode down the center of the cochlea in order to stimulate the cochlea to then send the auditory signal to our auditory nerve, which then gets sent to our brain. So a cochlear implant has some different parts. This would be the external portion of the cochlear implant, and then this would be the internal portion. The external portion has a microphone that sits on top of your ear, and then a little processor right there. And then it connects to a coil that is attached to your mastoid bone through a magnet, and it just magnetizes to the internal unit of the cochlear implant, which then has this little tiny wire that has electrodes inside our cochlea. cochlea. So what a surgeon would do would be to insert the electrode into the cochlea just in the correct manner in order to stimulate the cochlea properly. So I'm going to give a little history of how the cochlear implant was created, and it started with Alessandro Volta's development of the electric battery, and he was the first person to stimulate the auditory system in general. And then there was lots of other people that were able to stimulate just the cochlea or figure out the electric signals that the cochlea gave to the auditory nerve. But pretty much it started with Alessandro Volta's development of electric battery, and then the first cochlear implant was in 1978, and it was just this multi-electrode system. It wasn't actually the full-on cochlear implant that we have today, and this was developed by the University of California, San Francisco. And then from there, research progressed very rapidly. And starting in 1990 until now, I mean, the technology that we have today is very different and so much better. So cochlear implants today, there's 188,000 people that have been fitted in the world with cochlear implants. Specifically in America, there's 41,000 adults and 26,000 children that have cochlear implants. But the problem with implants that make it difficult to understand of, whether to have them or whether to not have them is that results can vary a lot. You see with individuals that the amount of damage to their ear could be more extensive than just their cochlea. And so they might not have the results that they would want to have, and therefore they're not really sure if it's working properly. But with most individuals, they can get some pretty good results with the cochlear implant, and there's lots of great stories that go along with it. But another factor in the results is that someone who is not used to hearing, their brain is not used to the auditory information, they have a hard time with all of a sudden having all of the sounds that we hear day to day. So it takes their brain a while to adjust, and it takes their brain a while to discriminate what kind of sounds are important to pay attention to and what kind of sounds are not as important. So results may be a result of the amount of time that somebody has the implant, and the results can just be different from person to person. So the average cost of a cochlear implant will vary also with insurance, with surgeons, with the state that you live in. There's just lots of different factors, but the NIH had an average cost of $60,000. And so this includes the surgery, adjusting the cochlear implant, and the training to use it properly. But it's interesting because they compared this statistic with the cost of what it is to be deaf. If you're deaf before the age of 3, the cost of living is more than $1 million to receive adaptation, like to receive speech therapy, to receive specialized education plan. To be deaf, it costs more than $1 million, which is very different than $60,000. So overall, cochlear implants are cost effective, which is crazy, but they are something that can be very great for an individual that has hearing loss. So kind of overall, when we're talking about cochlear implants, the technology was created because of sensory neural hearing loss, which has to do with the inner ear, and specifically the cochlear implant takes the place of the inner hair cells in the cochlea, which is in our inner ear. And so that is why we created the cochlear implants. And then it started with just stimulating the cochlea through electrical pulses, and then it's progressed all the way to the technology that we have today, which is just this little piece of a microphone on top of your ear connected to your mastoid. And so we've really progressed with the technology, and a cochlear implant is a great thing for somebody who has sensory neural hearing loss. and it can be something that can restore their hearing to the amount of them being able to actually discriminate speech sounds, to discriminate speech, and to know what somebody is saying, to be able to enjoy music, and to be able to be aware of their surroundings in a sound manner. And so I think that cochlear implants have really improved a lot of people's qualities of life, but it will depend on the person of whether or not they can fully restore their hearing. And most individuals that have cochlear implants will tell you that their hearing it's still not 100%, and it still might be muffled, and they might not fully get to enjoy music like a normal hearing individual, but they do get a higher quality of life than they would have before. So that is all I have about cochlear implants.